Everyone tells you to be humble about your money. Don't talk about it. Don't desire too much of it. If you get it, don't let it show. If you want more of it, you're greedy, selfish, or shallow. But what if I told you that every ounce of guilt you've ever felt about money, every pang of shame, every instinct to hide your ambition or apologize for your desire to succeed is not a moral insight, but a form of invisible slavery? That's not a metaphor. Let me ask you, have you ever received a bonus or landed a new client or outperformed your peers and felt a sense of anxious unease, as if you'd stolen something, as if you'd taken more than your share? Do you ever find yourself downplaying your achievements, or even sabotaging your own financial progress just to avoid the invisible glare of judgment from family, friends, or colleagues? If so, you're not alone. In fact, you are the target of a centuries-old psychological program, one that Nietzsche called slave morality. The world tells you that your ambition is a problem to be fixed, a sin to be atoned for. But what if it's not a problem at all? What if your hunger for money, your drive to excel, your refusal to settle are not character flaws but the very signs of life's creative force burning inside you? Nietzsche saw what almost no one else dared to see, that the origins of our guilt about money run far deeper than economics or etiquette. They are rooted in a profound inversion of values that began when the powerless, unable to seize wealth or status themselves, decided to redefine their own impotence as goodness, and to brand the very instincts of the strong as evil. In other words, the condemnation of wealth and ambition is not a moral truth, but a psychological revenge. He called it ressentiment, the quiet, festering envy of those who cannot act, who instead create narratives that make your strength a crime and their weakness a virtue. You were taught to feel bad about your gifts because it served someone else's sense of justice. Your guilt is not your own. It's inherited. Now, you might be wondering, is it possible to break these chains? Is it possible to want money, truly want it, work for it, accumulate it, use it without the shadow of guilt? Is it possible to pursue your own flourishing so unapologetically that the judgment of the herd no longer touches you? Nietzsche's answer is yes, but only if you are willing to confront the real source of your guilt and seize the terrifying freedom of creating your own values. He did not offer comfort or excuses. He issued a challenge: become the creator of your own life, or remain a slave to values that were planted in you by people who never wanted you to rise above your station. This is the secret that no tactical manipulation channel, no power hack guru, no surface-level confidence coach will ever give you. They teach you sneaky tricks to game the system, to appear powerful while remaining fundamentally dependent on others' approval. Nietzsche offers something far greater: the chance to become immune to the moral programming that keeps most people small. He shows you the path to authentic power, the kind that cannot be taken away by the changing winds of public opinion, the kind that makes you the master of your own ambition and the architect of your own wealth. Over the next 90 seconds, we're going to rip open the hidden history of money guilt, expose the roots of your internal conflict, and hand you the key Nietzsche forged for those willing to live beyond inherited shame. You'll see why your discomfort with ambition is not a sign of virtue, but a sign that you are ready to evolve beyond the herd. You'll discover how to transform guilt into creative energy, how to set boundaries without apology, and how to embody a relationship with money that is both powerful and guilt-free. So, if you're tired of living on the leash of invisible moral expectations, if you sense that your ambition is not a disease to be cured but a force to be unleashed, stay with me. Most people never escape the prison of inherited guilt, but you're not most people. Nietzsche didn't write for the masses. He wrote for those with the courage to ask, what if everything I was taught about success, money, and shame is a lie? Are you ready to break the chains? Are you ready to become the master of your own values, your own ambition, your own wealth? Then let's begin. If you want to understand why feeling bad about money is not a personal flaw but the result of centuries of psychological programming, you have to start where Nietzsche starts: the war between two kinds of morality. Picture this: on one side, the masters, those rare individuals who define what is good by their own flourishing, by their strength, vitality, and creative self-assertion. On the other, the slaves, those who, denied the power to create or to conquer, transform their impotence into a moral weapon. They label the master's ambition evil, their wealth greed, their joy in victory arrogance. This is not just history. It is the living battlefield inside you every time you hesitate to want more, every time you feel a pang of shame for desiring wealth or recognition. Nietzsche's genius was to see that morality itself is not a neutral code but a battlefield of values, and most of us, without realizing it, are fighting on the wrong side of our own desires. What is slave morality? It is the morality of the herd, of those who cannot act directly, and so must turn their frustration into a new kind of power, the power to judge. Ressentiment, Nietzsche called it, a seething, creative envy that invents values out of weakness. The slaves cannot seize wealth, so they say that poverty is virtuous. They cannot triumph, so they say that the meek shall inherit the earth. They cannot own their desires, so they teach you that to want is to sin. This is not an abstract theory. It is the story of every ambitious person who has ever been told. Don't get too big for your britches, or money will change you, or it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. These are not warnings, they are chains. Nietzsche saw how these chains are forged not just by priests and preachers, but by parents, teachers, friends, even the culture of so-called humility and community that surrounds you. Slave morality is internalized. It becomes a voice in your head that whispers, "If I put myself first, I am selfish. If I win, I must apologize. If I thrive, I must hide." But here is the truth. Guilt is not a sign of virtue. It is the residue of someone else's victory over your instincts. The more you feel it, the more you confirm the power of the values that were meant to keep you small. But what about master morality? The masters, those rare, dangerous individuals who create values from a place of abundance, define good as whatever affirms life, whatever expresses strength and excellence. For them, money is not a stain or a source of shame. It is a tool, a canvas, an extension of their will to power. Nietzsche does not mean power as domination over others, but the power to shape one's own existence, to create, to expand, to say yes to one's desires without apology. When the master wants, he acts. When he achieves, he celebrates. He does not ask for permission to flourish, and he does not need the herd's blessing to pursue wealth, status, or greatness. This is not sociopathy, it is authenticity. The master is not held hostage by the guilt of those who cannot or will not rise. You might be thinking, but isn't guilt natural? Doesn't it keep us from becoming monsters? Nietzsche's answer is radical. Guilt, as you know it, is not natural. It is manufactured, a product of the ascetic ideal, that centuries-old belief that suffering and self-denial are the highest goods. The Christian tradition elevated poverty and meekness to virtues not because they affirm life, but because they were the only weapons left to the weak. Over generations, this ideal seeped into the soil of Western culture, infecting even those who have never set foot in a church. Modern psychology backs Nietzsche up. The guilt you feel about money is not a spontaneous ethical insight. It is a learned reflex, the echo of a system that equates self-interest with sin and ambition with shame. So why do you sabotage yourself? Why do you under-earn, hesitate to negotiate, or shrink from opportunity? Because, deep down, you have been taught that your own flourishing is a threat, that to want is to harm, to win is to take from someone else. But Nietzsche offers liberation. The promise that you can revalue these inherited scripts. You can look at the voice of guilt and say, "You are not my conscience. You are the ghost of ancient weakness." The first act of freedom is to see guilt for what it is, a sign that you are ready to choose your own values, to become your own master. Nietzsche's call is not for ruthless greed, but for self-overcoming. He invites you to trace the genealogy of your beliefs about money and ambition and ask, do these serve my life, or do they sap my strength? Real morality, for Nietzsche, is not inherited, it is created. When you feel guilt about money, you are at a crossroads. Obey the old programming or step into the dangerous joy of value creation. This is the beginning of authentic power. This is where slave morality ends and your real life begins. Why do some people walk through life as if every dollar they earn is a mark against their soul, while others gather wealth and command respect without a trace of guilt? Nietzsche saw deeper than anyone before or since. The answer is not in income, not in upbringing, but in the very architecture of your morality. At the root of your financial shame, your hesitation to ask for more, your impulse to downplay your wins, your urge to apologize for your ambition are two warring value systems. Master morality and slave morality. Understanding this divide is the key to breaking the cycle of guilt and people-pleasing that keeps you financially and psychologically enslaved. Master morality is the morality of creators, of those who say yes to life and to themselves. Masters do not wait for permission to want, to achieve, to enjoy. For them, ambition is not a disease, but a vital sign. Wealth is not a danger, but a tool, a symbol of their capacity to shape the world. When a master succeeds, he feels no need to shrink, to hide, to apologize. He does not measure his worth by others' needs or resentments. Instead, he creates values out of strength. What I desire is good because it expresses my vitality. What affirms my life is noble. There is no guilt in this stance, only a relentless forward motion, a confidence that radiates and attracts. Now, contrast this with slave morality, the morality of the herd. Slave morality is born out of ressentiment, a deep, simmering envy that cannot act directly, so it acts indirectly. The weak, unable to seize power, rewrite the rules so that their own impotence becomes goodness, and the natural desires of the strong become evil. The result is a moral inversion. Humility is worshipped, ambition is condemned, poverty is a badge of honor, and wealth is a source of shame. This isn't just a social script, it's a psychological virus. Those trapped in slave morality are trained to believe that every instinct towards self-assertion is dangerous. They internalize the gaze of the herd, living their entire lives in anticipation of criticism or ostracism for stepping out of line. Here's the brutal truth Nietzsche uncovered. Most people alive today, especially in the West, are governed by slave morality, even if they've never set foot in a church or read a religious text. The culture of guilt surrounding money and ambition is a direct inheritance from this centuries-old revolt of the powerless. The voice that says, "You shouldn't want more," or "You're being greedy," is not your conscience. It's the echo of a system designed to keep you docile, predictable, and easy to manage. But it gets worse. Slave morality is sticky. It attaches itself to your subconscious, warping your self-image until you become your own jailer. You start to sabotage your own victories. You hesitate to negotiate, you undercharge, you defer to others' needs, and you call it kindness or integrity. In reality, it is fear, fear of standing alone, fear of being envied, fear of being seen as too much. You become, as Nietzsche put it, a domesticated animal, bred for obedience rather than greatness. What does this look like in practice? Imagine two people in a salary negotiation. The master enters knowing his worth, unapologetically asking for what he wants, seeing the process as an expression of his will to power. If he gets what he wants, he feels no shame. If he doesn't, he tries again. The slave, on the other hand, is already negotiating against himself before the meeting starts. He worries about being seen as ungrateful, as greedy. He lowers his expectations, rationalizes his compromises, and walks away feeling virtuous for not rocking the boat, even as resentment festers inside him. This pattern is everywhere. in the entrepreneur who downplays her ambition so as not to intimidate her friends, in the employee who works overtime without asking for more because he fears being judged, in the creative who charges less than he's worth out of a twisted sense of moral obligation. All of it is the invisible hand of slave morality, turning strength into guilt, ambition into self-doubt. But Nietzsche didn't just diagnose the disease, he offered the cure. The way out is not to become a manipulator or a cynic, but to embrace the path of the value creator. You must recognize that the morality you inherited was not designed for your flourishing. You must unlearn the reflex of apology and relearn the art of affirmation. This is not about crushing others. It's about refusing to participate in a rigged game. When you stop judging your desires through the eyes of the herd, you gain the freedom to create your own standards. Standards that affirm your strength, your creativity, your right to thrive. Ask yourself, whose values are you living by? When you want more, do you shrink or do you step forward? When you succeed, do you celebrate or do you hide? This is the master-slave test. And only by passing it, by daring to affirm your will to power, can you claim a life free from the tyranny of inherited guilt. The world will not hand you this freedom. It must be seized, and the first act is to break the internal contract with the slave morality that has kept you small. When you do, you become untouchable. Not because others cannot judge you, but because their judgment loses all power over your soul. Guilt is not some inner oracle warning you away from evil. For ambitious people, guilt is more often a parasite, a voice that keeps you small, chained, and apologetic for wanting more than what the herd deems appropriate. Nietzsche saw this with terrifying clarity. The guilt you feel about money, about striving, about standing out is not a sign of ethical refinement. It is the residue of centuries-old psychological warfare waged by those who could not win in the world of action. So they invented a moral code that would make your victory feel like a sin. The weak, unable to take power, rebranded their impotence as virtue and called your strength evil. The result? An epidemic of internalized shame, passed down like a family heirloom, infecting every negotiation, every ambition, every moment you dare to want more. Modern psychology has only begun to catch up to what Nietzsche diagnosed in the 19th century. We now call it internalized oppression or chronic success, guilt. If you grew up in a household or a culture that praised self-sacrifice, modesty, and not making waves, then you absorbed the message that your financial ambition is dangerous. Want too much, and you betray the tribe. Succeed too much, and you risk exile. So you learn to self-sabotage. You lower your rates, you apologize for winning, you instinctively defer to others' needs above your own, and then you call it kindness or humility. But the truth is, this pattern is not about kindness. It is a reflex of self-preservation in a moral ecosystem designed by the powerless. Let's break down how this guilt operates on the psychological level. First, there's cognitive dissonance. The mental friction between your natural, life-affirming desire for expansion and the inherited script that says ambition is selfish. This dissonance breeds anxiety, procrastination, and self-sabotage. You want to move forward, but the guilt pulls you back. The more you try to suppress your desire, the more it leaks out sideways through burnout, resentment, or the silent conviction that you'll never truly deserve what you earn. Then there's the people-pleasing trap. Nietzsche would call this a form of ressentiment turned inward. Instead of acting on your desires, you make yourself useful to others, hoping their approval will neutralize your guilt. You become a master of anticipating others' needs, but a stranger to your own. Every yes that goes against your ambition chips away at your sense of self. Eventually, you no longer know what you want, only what will keep you in the herd's good graces. But guilt is not just a feeling, it is a worldview. It is an entire architecture of self-perception, built on the foundation of slave morality. The ascetic ideal, which Nietzsche skewered, teaches you that suffering is noble, that denying yourself is a sign of goodness. This is why, even after you achieve a goal, get the promotion, land the deal, you feel a strange emptiness. a sense of having betrayed something essential. The ascetic ideal is so deeply rooted that it can turn any act of self-assertion into a source of shame. Here's the crucial insight. Guilt is a map, but most people read it backwards. If you feel guilty about wanting more, it is not proof that your ambition is wrong, it is proof that you are ready to evolve beyond the values you inherited. Guilt is the friction that signals a mismatch between your inherited programming and your emerging identity. Nietzsche's genius was to recognize that this friction is an invitation, not a warning. It is the signpost that you are living on the frontier of your own value creation. So how do you break free? You start by tracing the genealogy of your guilt. Ask yourself, whose voice is this, really? Is it your parents? Your culture? Your faith? Is it the voice of the conquered, warning you not to rise? Then, you practice revaluation, Nietzsche's radical call to assess every inherited value in the light of your own flourishing. Does this guilt serve your growth, or does it keep you obedient? When you catch yourself apologizing for ambition, pause and declare, "This is not my shame, this is a script." In that moment, you reclaim authorship of your own story. Modern empowerment science points in the same direction. Therapists now use cognitive behavioral tools to help clients reframe guilt-inducing beliefs, to replace people-pleasing with boundary setting, to integrate the shadow, those repressed desires that are actually the engines of authentic success. You can journal your guilt triggers, challenge their origins, and rewrite them as affirmations of will to power. My desire for more is not a flaw, but a force of life. You can surround yourself with others who celebrate ambition, not resent it, and you can model your own path after those rare individuals who have made peace with power. The ultimate test is the thought experiment of eternal recurrence. If you were to live your life over and over, would you want to keep apologizing for your ambition? Or would you finally declare, "I will my fate. I own my desire. I choose my values." This is not arrogance. It is the beginning of freedom. Nietzsche's message is clear. Guilt is not your conscience. It's a signal that you are ready to become the master of your destiny. The only real sin is to ignore that call and remain a slave not just to others, but to the smallest, most fearful part of yourself. If you want to understand why the will to power is the ultimate antidote to money guilt, you have to abandon everything you've been taught about power as domination. Nietzsche's will to power is not about lording it over others. It is the fundamental drive to expand, to create, to intensify your existence, to become more than you were yesterday. In the realm of wealth and ambition, this means seeing money not as a symbol of greed or a trophy for the socially approved, but as fuel for self-expression, for risk, for the ongoing project of becoming. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a decision. Ask for the raise, launch the business, claim your worth. The voice of inherited guilt, the voice of the herd, urges caution. Who do you think you are? Isn't this selfish? What if you make others envious? But the will to power cuts through this paralysis. It reframes ambition as a creative act, a way of giving form to your life, not just taking from others. Nietzsche would have you see that your financial desires, when authentically owned, are not acts of violence, but of artistry. Your self-expansion is not theft, it's an expression of the abundance of life. To apply the will to power in your own life, you must start by refusing to see money as a zero-sum game. Slave morality constructs wealth as a moral battleground. If you have more, someone else must have less. But Nietzsche's master morality sees wealth as a tool that multiplies your creative agency. When you invest in yourself, when you claim more, you are not stealing from the world, you are bringing new possibilities into being. The entrepreneur who raises capital, the artist who charges premium rates, the strategist who demands a larger share, they are not simply accumulating. They are manifesting new realities, new opportunities, new standards of value. Wealth, in this Nietzschean sense, is not an end in itself, but a medium for self-overcoming. But how do you break the spell of guilt in practical terms? Nietzsche would say, begin with a ruthless audit of your values. Write down every inherited belief about money, success, and ambition. Whose voice is it? Does it serve your flourishing, or does it keep you in place? The will to power demands that you take ownership of your values, that you become the creator, not the passive recipient of your standards. When you feel guilt, don't shrink from it. Examine it as a clue to where someone else's morality has colonized your psyche. Next, practice affirming your ambition without shame. This is not self-indulgent affirmation. It is the disciplined act of aligning your daily choices with your highest vision of yourself. Every time you negotiate, every time you create, every time you risk being seen, you are exercising the will to power. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, love of fate, offers a daily mindset shift that transforms guilt into resilience. Instead of regretting your ambition or apologizing for your success, you practice embracing your desires as necessary, as part of your unique path. Ask yourself, if you had to live this life eternally, would you choose to keep apologizing for your power? Or would you finally embrace it as your destiny? This is not about arrogance. It is about radical acceptance and commitment to your own becoming. Modern psychology echoes Nietzsche's insights. Cognitive reframing, boundary setting, and mindful self-assertion are proven tools for overcoming guilt and people-pleasing. But Nietzsche gives these tactics a deeper foundation. He gives you philosophical permission to say, I set boundaries not to exclude others, but to protect the temple of my own becoming. I claim wealth not for shallow status, but because I refuse to let the world define the limits of my growth. In this way, every financial action becomes an act of value creation, a manifestation of your will to power. This transformation does not mean you lose empathy or connection. Nietzschean power is not about trampling others, it's about rising above the need for their approval. When you operate from this place, you attract respect not because you manipulated the situation, but because you radiate authenticity and strength that cannot be faked. You become immune to petty envy, to the guilt trips of the herd, to the manipulations of those who want you small. You become, in Nietzsche's words, the artist of your own life, and money becomes another brush in your hand. In the end, embracing the will to power is the only sustainable way to pursue wealth and success without guilt. It turns every financial decision into a creative act, every negotiation into a step in your self-overcoming, every achievement into a testament to your refusal to be ruled by inherited shame. The world is full of people playing small, waiting for permission to want more. Nietzsche's challenge and his gift is to claim your place among those rare individuals who embody power not as dominance, but as creative affirmation. Live this way, and you don't just accumulate wealth, you become the source of new values, new possibilities, and a new definition of what it means to thrive. If you want to see Nietzsche's war between slave morality and master morality unfold, you don't need to travel back to the medieval church or the dusty streets of ancient Rome. You just have to look at the modern world, at your own career, your bank account, your most private ambitions. Today's battleground is everywhere. In the office, on social media, around the family dinner table. The psychology Nietzsche exposed is alive and evolving, shaping how we relate to money, success, and each other in ways so subtle that most never see the strings. But if you learn to recognize these patterns, you can break them and claim a kind of power that manipulation and power hacks can never touch. Let's start with a salary negotiation, one of the most common places where money guilt shows its teeth. Picture two employees. One enters the room already, apologizing for his ask, qualifying his value, hedging every statement with, "I just hope this is okay." The other walks in with a calm certainty, stating what she wants and why, without the tremor of guilt in her voice. The first is a product of slave morality preemptively shrinking to avoid the herd's judgment, haunted by the fear of being greedy. The second is animated by master morality, seeing her ambition as an affirmation, not a transgression. The result? The apologetic one leaves money on the table, rationalizes it as fair, and nurses a quiet resentment. The confident one is rewarded, not just financially, but in self-respect. Nietzsche would say, The world grants power to those who dare to claim it without shame. Or consider the phenomenon of quiet quitting, the modern malaise where employees do the bare minimum, justified by a sense that the system is rigged, that striving is pointless or even wrong. Slave morality feeds this, whispering that ambition is suspect, that it is better to blend in, to avoid standing out lest you attract envy or conflict. But the master morality individual takes the opposite path. They see every workplace as an arena for the will to power, not to dominate others, but to express their own potential. They take risks, propose new ideas, negotiate for better terms, and if the environment proves too stifling, they create their own. They are not chained by the herd's disapproval because their standard is internal. Social media amplifies these dynamics to a fever pitch. Post about a new car, a business milestone, or a lavish vacation, and watch the moral policing begin. Must be nice. Some people have all the luck. You should be more humble. The digital mob, animated by ressentiment, tries to pull the successful back to earth, to weaponize guilt as a means of control. This is slave morality in algorithmic form, mass-producing shame to keep the ambitious in check. Yet, the Nietzschean response is not to hide or apologize, but to own your wins, to celebrate achievement as a gift to yourself and to those inspired by your courage. The true master does not seek validation from the feed, they create value for its own sake, immune to the crowd's approval or envy. Even in friendships and families, money guilt is a corrosive force. How many times have you caught yourself downplaying a raise, deflecting praise, or offering to pick up the tab next time out of a sense that your success might make others uncomfortable? This is the ascetic ideal at work, the unspoken belief that the highest virtue is self-denial, that to thrive is to threaten the tribe. Nietzsche's answer? Refuse to apologize for your flourishing. If those around you cannot celebrate your ascent, it is a mirror of their own internalized slave morality, not an indictment of your ambition. The Übermensch, the ideal of self-overcoming, draws strength not from conformity but from the creative act of value creation in each new situation. Even the phenomenon of imposter syndrome, which plagues high achievers across industries, is a modern echo of slave morality. The feeling that you are a fraud, that you do not deserve your position or income, comes from measuring yourself against inherited standards designed to humble, to restrict, to keep you apologetic for your potency. Nietzsche's philosophy offers a radical cure. Redefine your own standards, own your excellence, and see your achievements as the natural outgrowth of your will to power, not as vulgar deviations from humility. Practical application is not abstract. It's the entrepreneur who raises her prices to reflect her true value, and refuses to feel guilty for leaving behind clients who can't or won't pay. It's the manager who establishes boundaries with colleagues who try to guilt-trip him into extra work. It's the artist who markets her work boldly, not as a plea for approval, but as an unapologetic expression of her creative force. These are living examples of Nietzschean value creation master morality in action, cutting through guilt with the sword of authenticity. The modern world is desperate for this kind of strength, not the strength of manipulation, but the strength of self-mastery. The most successful people you know, the ones whose power feels effortless and whose presence bends reality, are not those who play the herd's games better. They are the ones who have stepped outside the game entirely, who have revalued what it means to win, to earn, to want. They have made peace with ambition, integrated their shadow, and now act from a place of inner permission that no amount of social policing can touch. Ask yourself, in your next moment of decision, will you defer to inherited guilt, or will you create your own script? The world will challenge you, judge you, try to guilt you back into conformity. Nietzsche's challenge is to meet every such moment as the master meets the herd, with creative affirmation, unashamed of your desire, ready to live as the author of your own success story. That is how you turn philosophy into power and guilt into gold. If you want to break free from the invisible prison of money guilt, it is not enough to absorb Nietzschean philosophy as abstract theory. You must translate it into daily practice, a lived process of self-overcoming, value creation, and unapologetic ambition. Nietzsche's wisdom is not for armchair intellectuals. It is a challenge to the marrow of your being, a call to forge your own path through the concrete choices you make every day about money, work, and self-worth. The world is saturated with inherited scripts, voices that whisper, "Don't want too much. Don't stand out. Don't make others uncomfortable." The only way to silence these ghosts is to confront them directly, to revalue your values, and to act in accordance with your highest vision of yourself. Begin with the genealogical audit. Take an hour and write down every belief you hold about money, success, and ambition. Whose voice is it? Is it your parents, your religious upbringing, your peers, the culture at large? Nietzsche's genealogy method isn't about blaming others. It's about shining a ruthless light on the roots of your guilt. When you see, in black and white, that most of these beliefs are hand-me-downs from those who feared power or resented it, you gain the first taste of liberation. This is not mine. Once you've exposed the inherited scripts, it's time for revaluation. Nietzsche's call to revalue all values is not a philosophical exercise, it is a practical revolution. Look at each belief and ask, does this serve my flourishing, or does it keep me small? If it is life-denying, if it breeds shame, hesitation, or self-sabotage, discard it. Replace it with a principle that affirms your will to power, your drive to create, expand, and express your unique potential. Write a new personal manifesto. For example, I view money as a tool for creative self-overcoming, not as a source of shame or moral compromise. But insight is nothing without action. The next step is to practice daily affirmation of your will to power. Each morning, before you open your inbox or face the world, choose a simple affirmation. I create and affirm my values through my actions and ambitions. This is not empty self-help. It is a conscious act of aligning your mind, body, and behavior with the philosophy you wish to embody. Throughout the day, whenever guilt or hesitation surfaces, anchor yourself in this affirmation. Remind yourself that the very feeling of guilt is proof that you are crossing the threshold into a new, self-created life. Set boundaries. This is where Nietzschean empowerment leaves self-help behind and enters the realm of real freedom. Practice saying no to people-pleasing demands that drain your energy and undermine your goals. If you are asked to take on work that does not serve your ambitions, or to give more than you can without resentment, decline with clarity and without apology. The first time will feel terrifying, the second, liberating. Each act of assertiveness is a small declaration of sovereignty, a break in the chain of inherited servitude. Integrate your shadow. Nietzsche and Jung both understood that guilt is often the result of repressed desires, potent energies that, denied, turn against us as shame or self-sabotage. Take time to journal about the parts of yourself you have been taught to hide, your competitiveness, your hunger for recognition, your desire for more. Instead of shaming these drives, honor them as aspects of your creative force. Shadow integration is not about unchecked indulgence, but about refusing to be at war with yourself. When you own your ambition, you become whole, and guilt loses its grip. Surround yourself with a new tribe. Community matters. If you keep company with those who resent ambition or shame success, your progress will be slow and painful. Seek out mentors, peers, and friends who celebrate growth, who challenge you to want more, who see your wins as inspiration, not a threat. This is the practical Nietzschean act of choosing your environment, of forging a context where your will to power is not only tolerated but encouraged. Finally, practice the thought experiment of eternal recurrence. Each night, ask yourself, if I had to live this day over and over again, did I honor my authentic desires? Did I act from my own values or from fear of judgment? This isn't just philosophy. It is a daily accountability ritual that will keep you aligned with your highest self. The transformation will not happen overnight. There will be setbacks. Moments when old guilt returns, or when social pressure tempts you to shrink. That is the test. the crucible in which your new values are forged. Nietzsche never promised comfort, he promised greatness for those who dare. Practical Nietzschean living means choosing, every day, to break the chain of money, guilt, and to walk the path of the creator, not the slave. Remember, the world doesn't need more people playing small or apologizing for their power. It needs individuals willing to live as examples of what is possible when guilt is burned away by the fire of self-mastery. Every decision, every conversation, every negotiation is a chance to actualize Nietzsche's philosophy not as a scholar, but as a living, breathing overman. That is how you turn philosophy into power and ambition into a source of genuine joy. If you have followed this journey to its end, you are no longer the same person who began it. You have stared straight into the machinery of guilt, peeled back the layers of inherited morality, and glimpsed the strange freedom that Nietzsche promised to those rare enough to seek it. This is the moment of philosophical reckoning, the point where you must decide not just what you believe, but how you will live. Will you continue to wear the invisible chains of money, shame, and people-pleasing, or will you forge your own values, claim your ambition, and enter the world as a living embodiment of the will to power? The first step is the hardest: to accept that the guilt you feel about your wealth, your ambition, your hunger to become more, it was never truly yours. It is a relic, a haunting, a ghost story told by the weak to comfort themselves in the shadow of strength. Nietzsche teaches us that the voice which says, "Be humble, be small, don't want too much," is not your conscience, it is the echo of ressentiment, the legacy of a herd morality designed to make you feel bad for what is most vital and creative in you. The pain of success guilt is the pain of being too large for the values you inherited. The discomfort is a signal, not of moral failure, but of philosophical evolution. But awareness alone is not enough. Transformation requires self-overcoming, a daily, disciplined process of revaluing every inherited belief about money and worth. This is not about becoming ruthless or narcissistic. True Nietzschean empowerment is not domination, but creative affirmation. It is not about crushing others, but about refusing to crush your own desires in the name of inherited shame. When you embrace your will to power, you become the author of your life's meaning. Money becomes a tool, not a master. Ambition becomes a force for creation, not a source of guilt. To live this philosophy is to accept the challenge of amor fati, to love your fate, your ambitions, your flaws, your victories. The world will try to shame you back into the herd. It will call you arrogant, selfish, greedy. Let them. Nietzsche's Übermensch does not live for the approval of the crowd. He transcends the need for external validation by creating his own values. You are not here to play small so that others feel comfortable. You are here to expand, to create, to celebrate your existence through every achievement, every boundary set, every unapologetic yes to your own flourishing. The path forward is not always easy. There will be days when the old guilt returns, when the urge to appease or self-sabotage re-emerges. In those moments, remember Nietzsche's lesson: transformation is a process, not a destination. Every time you catch yourself feeling guilty for your ambition, pause and ask, whose values are these? Do they serve my life? If the answer is no, reject them. Write your own manifesto. Practice radical honesty with yourself and others. Surround yourself with those who celebrate your success, not those who try to shame you back into mediocrity. Your implementation is simple but profound. Each morning set an intention. Today I act from my will to power, not from inherited guilt. Each evening reflect, did I live today as my own value creator, or did I shrink to fit someone else's script? When you feel the pull of people-pleasing, set a boundary. When you feel the pang of money shame, remind yourself that wealth is a tool for creation, not a moral crime. As you act from this place of philosophical sovereignty, you will notice subtle, seismic shifts. Negotiations become less fraught because you no longer fear being too much. Opportunities multiply, because you radiate the strength of someone unencumbered by apology. Relationships deepen because you are no longer hiding your true desires. Most importantly, you discover that the greatest power is not in manipulating others, but in being immune to their attempts to manipulate you. You become, quite literally, the master of your own destiny. Nietzsche did not write to comfort the masses. He wrote for the few, with the courage to live dangerously, to embrace the chaos of self-creation, to risk being misunderstood in the pursuit of greatness. If you have made it this far, you are one of those few. The world is hungry for examples of unapologetic ambition, for men and women who refuse to wear the cloak of inherited shame. By living as a Nietzschean creator, by turning guilt into strength, resentment into vision, conformity into authenticity, you do more than free yourself. You become a beacon for others trapped in the same prison. So, as you step back into the world, ask yourself, will you continue to seek permission for your power, or will you embody the very philosophy you have learned? The herd will always try to reclaim you. But now you know, their values are not your limit, unless you let them be. Let your success become your protest, your ambition, your affirmation, your life, your answer to their ressentiment. In the end, the only approval you need is your own. And in claiming it, you claim the rarest, most resilient form of freedom, one that no herd, no moral system, no guilt can ever take away.